All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive, really foundational architectural shift that's happening right now in senior living, in post-acute care. For the past 2 decades, modernization in this industry basically just meant buying more software. We kind of thought if we digitized enough paperwork, we'd eventually stumble into efficiency. But we're actually moving away from those isolated software applications and entering a completely new era. It's an era where your success absolutely depends on an operator-controlled intelligence layer, a unified system that connects the entire business. If you're an operator, an owner, or a capital provider, the architecture of your data is literally about to become your biggest strategic advantage.
So, let's just dive right into this. We need to confront the painful reality of what our tech stacks actually look like today. Operators were sold a dream, right? We were told that buying an electronic health record, an EMR, a CRM, a billing system, and a payroll system would equal digital transformation. But just look at the tangled web of disconnected systems we've actually built. You really got to ask yourself, did we buy a digital transformation, or did we just buy application sprawl? The hard truth is that every vendor solves a tiny piece of the puzzle, but very few connect the whole business. And honestly, this results in chaotic, stressful fragmentation rather than true operational integration.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're hitting the application sprawl problem, the danger of vendor silos, the interoperability precedent, the enterprise memory solution, real-world operating intelligence, and finally, owning your enterprise future. We're moving logically from diagnosing the problem to architecting a concrete solution.
Section 1. The application sprawl problem. Let's start by dissecting the illusion of modernization that's plaguing so many multi-community operators right now.
Just look at this fragmented patchwork we're dealing with. We've got an EHR for clinical documentation, a CRM for leads and move-ins. We have billing systems for revenue, payroll for the workforce, and totally separate compliance systems for risk. Yes, we've successfully digitized our workflows, but in doing so, we've created a massive, dangerous gap between where data is created and where decisions are actually made. Clinical teams only see resident care, finance teams only see revenue, and your regional operators and executives, they're basically left playing detective with disconnected spreadsheets, usually only spotting destructive patterns after the damage has already hit the net operating income. Think about it. A resident's acuity might rise in the clinical system on a Tuesday, but if that doesn't immediately flow into labor planning and billing, you are leaking margin by Wednesday.
89.1%. That's the occupancy rate senior housing hit at the end of 2025, according to the National Investment Center. So, demand is absolutely strengthening. But here's the catch. Higher occupancy doesn't eliminate operational fragility. It actually raises the stakes. With buildings this full, operators have to manage acuity creep, severe staffing pressures, and regulatory compliance risks with absolute precision. The margin for error is literally zero. You simply can't afford to let your operational data sit idle in silos anymore.
Section 2. Danger of vendor silos. Let's explore exactly why these disconnected, vendor-controlled silos are so incredibly dangerous to your bottom line.
Now, there is a massive difference between an application dashboard and true operating intelligence. Vendors absolutely love giving you dashboards, but a dashboard just tracks a workflow. It gives you the operational baseline, like what's today's census or what shifts are open right now. Operating intelligence, on the other hand, answers complex business model questions. It tells you which communities are actually converting that census into durable economic value, or which buildings have rising care complexity without the matching service revenue. You just can't run a complex enterprise on workflow answers alone. The reality is, vendor silos have deep structural limitations. Why? Because a vendor's data model reflects their product, not your enterprise. Their integrations are rarely neutral. They want you locked into their ecosystem. And then there's AI, which is fascinating because AI actually makes this problem worse. An AI agent is only as good as the context it has access to. If your AI tool is stuck inside a standalone billing silo, it completely lacks the clinical or labor context to give you a meaningful answer. Ultimately, vendor incentives are built around their own commercial expansion, while your incentives require total flexibility, transparency, and decision leverage across your entire business.
Section 3. The interoperability precedent. To prove that this market friction will eventually bend to your will, let's look at a major precedent outside of senior living.
For years, life sciences giants IQVIA and Veeva Systems were locked in this high-stakes litigation across clinical and commercial data. It created massive, painful friction for their enterprise customers who desperately needed their CRM, data, and clinical operations to talk to each other so they could launch life-saving drugs. They suffered through years of this friction pre-2025. Then, Finally, in August 2025, the two companies resolved their disputes and announced long-term partnerships allowing mutual use of data and software. Why the sudden change of heart? Simple, because the customers finally demanded it.
Enterprise customers eventually force interoperability when vendor conflict blocks business performance. That's the key takeaway here. You literally cannot run a mission-critical senior care business around vendor rivalries. The market eventually supports governed interoperability because large operators simply will not tolerate closed system conflicts when they block business performance. Senior living is approaching this exact same inflection point right now.
Section 4, the enterprise memory solution. This brings us to the core thesis of today's explainer. Now, we absolutely have to acknowledge that incumbents like point-click care are essential. They're a massive, critical system of record for clinical care. But the EHR is not the enterprise. The resident record is not the complete operating record. To bridge the gap, you need an enterprise memory. This is a canonical operating record spanning across all your applications. It tracks resident history, care, billing, labor, incidents, and asset value in one central governed layer that you, the operator, actually control.
And listen, establishing this doesn't mean you have to rip and replace your current software stack. It's really about implementing these 8 core components to connect them. You need a canonical data model that speaks your unique business language. You need a data portability layer to freely extract your information. And you absolutely need master entity resolution, so the system actually knows that Jane Doe in your CRM is the exact same Jane Doe in your billing and incident logs. Add in clear data lineage for auditability, role-based intelligence so the right people see the right data, and cross-domain analytics. When you layer an AI-ready context on top of all that, your fragmented software stack suddenly acts as a unified brain.
Section 5, real-world operating intelligence. Let's look at some tangible proof of how this actively prevents financial erosion. Let's trace a typical scenario here. First, a resident's acuity quietly rises. Next, the care tasks and labor requirements shift to meet that new clinical need. Then, the service-level billing is supposed to update to capture that cost. And finally, the operating margin is impacted. In a siloed environment, the clinical team sees step 1, HR sees step 2, the finance team sees step 3, and ownership feels the pain of step 4 months later on a trailing report. But true enterprise memory connects this entire chain reaction instantly across departments, so you can intervene and correct the course before your margin just quietly vanishes. These micro-narratives really highlight the sheer power of cross-domain intelligence. Think about early survey risk detection. Instead of just reacting to citations after they happen, your intelligence layer detects the underlying patterns, like a string of late assessments, combined with weekend staffing instability long before the state surveyors even show up. Or take referral quality fit. Your sales dashboard might celebrate a move-in, but your intelligence layer tells you if that specific referral source actually produces long-stayed durable economic value. It ruthlessly finds missed revenue leakage by comparing care delivered against care billed. And crucially for ownership, it connects your CapEx decisions directly to operating outcomes and long-term asset valuation.
Section 6, owning your enterprise future. Finally, let's look at the strategic battleground ahead and where you need to position your organization.
The future of the market is organizing into these 4 distinct layers. Layer 1 is your systems of record, the daily workhorses like EHRs and CRMs. Layer 2 is integration and access, moving data through APIs. Layer 4 is decision and action, where AI agents and executive reporting live. But the absolute most critical battleground for your business is Layer 3, operator-controlled intelligence. The biggest strategic risk you face moving forward is letting a third-party software vendor own Layer 3. If they do, your enterprise memory, your AI context, and your cross-community benchmarks are going to remain forever trapped inside their walled garden.
So here is your new organizational mantra. Vendors run workflows. Operators must control the operating intelligence. To pull this off, you've got to aggressively secure your data rights at the contract level. Demand data portability by default. Ensure interoperability without financial punishment, and demand transparent data models from every partner you sign with. You can rent the software to run your daily workflows, but you must never outsource your enterprise brain to a vendor's underlying architecture is ultimately designed around their own commercial expansion.
I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to consider as you evaluate your current tech stack, your legal contracts, and your long-term strategy moving forward. The combination of incoming AI capabilities, massive capital pressure, rising acuity, and severe margin sensitivity, it's forcing our industry's hand. Will you step up to control your own intelligence layer, or will you remain trapped inside vendor silos? The operators who win this next decade won't simply be the ones with the most software. They'll be the ones with a superior enterprise memory. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to start assessing your data architecture today.